Sports betting season is in full force. You need a sportsbook with integrity and longevity like BetUS. You may already know this, but BetUS has been pioneers in the sportsbook industry for almost 3 decades, thriving and paying their loyal customer base. That is BetUS.com. They have loads of bonuses. Join now or call 800-69-BET-US. That is 800-MY-BET-US, and you will receive a 125% sign-up bonus by using the bonus code 5. That's the word 5, F-I-V-E. They also have re-up and referral bonuses as well. Follow my lead and open an account with BetUS. You bet, you win, you get paid. BetUS. This show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a revolutionary new daily fantasy game whereby you pick 2, 3, or 4 players to go over or under their fantasy point projections, and if you're correct, you win. Pick 2 or more players from the same sport or league, or go cross leagues for your parlay. Use the promo code 5, that's F-I-V-E, 5, and receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. But first, sign up at prizepicks.com to start winning today. This show is brought to you by Lewis Peters State Farm, agency representing the #1 auto and home insurer in the United States for more than 60 years combined experience in the insurance industry. Local agents that understand South Florida's unique market. You have access to them 24/7, walk in, call in, click in through lewispeters.com. You can find them online on social media at SF Agent Peters, or you can call at 305-275-5585. Remember, lewispeters.com.
Welcome to 3 Yards Per Carry, a podcast covering the Miami Dolphins and the NFL. Now, here's your hosts, Chris, Alf, and Simon.
And we're on, and welcome to another edition of 3 Yards Per Carry. I'm Alfredo Arteaga. Simon Clancy is here. Chris Kaufman is not. He returns on Monday. It's too difficult to explain all the things that he has working today, so he's not going to be able to be with us. But Simon Clancy is here, and so am I. Hello, Simon. It's been a while.
Hello, Alf. Has it?
Yeah, it has. We didn't do a show last week, did we? Or we did one on Monday? I don't remember the last time we did a show.
Dude, I can't remember.
Yeah, but yeah, team is in the midst of a playoff run, and it's getting closer. Everybody keeps asking me, like, what do they have to do to make the playoffs? It's getting clearer by the day. If they win out, they're pretty much in. New York Times has them at 94%. 94% is pretty good. Last time I checked. Okay. The only thing is everything around them is a little bit different. Okay. And what's helping them is the better teams are playing everybody that's in front of us. For example, the Kansas City Chiefs. Nobody's playing better football than the Kansas City Chiefs. And if you look at their schedule coming up, they play the Chargers, the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Broncos in a row. Like, that's pretty good. That's everybody that's in front of us by one game. So they get to bring them back down to us as we, elevate toward them. So your thoughts on this entire chase, Simon?
I mean, excuse me. I don't think Miami will win all 4 games. So I think you can toss out that 90, whatever it was that you said, % chance. I don't think the Dolphins are going 4-0 over the next 4 games. So I think you're reliant on other teams. I don't think the Dolphins will make the playoffs. I didn't think they made the playoffs at the start of the season. Obviously, certainly didn't think they were going to make the playoffs halfway through, and I don't think they'll make the playoffs now. Too many stupid losses, too many bad performances. I think it's specifically Jacksonville, Atlanta. I mean, the Raiders wasn't a bad performance, but it's a game they should have won. And I think that's ultimately what will keep them out of the playoffs. So, but I don't think they'll go 4-0. And realistically, I don't think they'll go 9-0 on that entire run.
It'll be historic if they pull it off.
Yeah, well, I don't think they will. They're not good. I just don't think they're good enough. I don't think they're good enough to go to Tennessee and run the ball in the cold at Tennessee. And New England's going to be, New England going to be playing probably for home field advantage. And that's a good team. New England can be got at, but they can be got at in the things that we don't do very well. Run the ball. So, and they are, their game is much more advanced than it was in week one. They've hit their stride, certainly with the running game and with what Jones can do. And, Matthew Judon is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. And, that would be an issue, I think. So we'll see. But I think everybody's sort of talking about, the Dolphins control their own. Well, they do, but there's a difference between controlling your own destiny and playing for really shocking teams to get into the playoffs. I don't think that's the case. 3 of the 4 teams are fighting for their playoff lives. New Orleans, certainly. Tennessee obviously want to try and battle for home field and to win the division. And New England, they're in the box seat for home field advantage. So it'll be tough.
Yeah, the great thing about it is that, the old cliche, one game at a time, it really is one game at a time. I don't believe they'll lose to New Orleans. I think that team is it's teetering on implosion. And, they're kind of set up for the Dolphins, especially since their quarterback is Taysom Hill. Okay. But, that game against Tennessee in Tennessee is a rough one. That's the game. That's the season right there. They win that one, start believing. Because then you have a team that's on an 8-game winning streak coming back home to play a team that might not even have anything to play for in New England. Although New England has an extremely tough stretch right here. They play the Colts and then they play the Bills again. And I'm still of the belief that the Bills are just, they've had a string of bad luck. That game against New England, I don't know what your thoughts were, but that was just odd. How you get defeated by a team that runs the ball 3 times and runs it 47 times and only runs it effectively in the first half, because you can't throw the ball because the wind is 50 miles an hour, so you can barely throw the ball. And then when you have opportunities down the stretch, the Bills just flat out blew it. So I don't know what your thoughts were on that game. I was extremely impressed by the New England defense, but should I have been? The wind at 50 miles an hour, like, I don't care how strong-armed you are. Josh Allen or no Josh Allen, nobody can throw in that weather.
You've got to play to circumstance, and they were just out-coached. I mean,
yeah,
it's a home game. They can't run the ball. They've not been able to run the ball for 3 seasons. They have, I think they have 5 100-yard games in the last 3 years, and 3 of those were by Josh Allen, and the other 2 I think were for 109 and 106 yards. So, neither Singletary or Zach Moss can get it done on the ground. So they were just out-coached. In a 50-mile-an-hour wind, you should just be able to, run the ball, especially, and then throw it when you can, when you've got the wind behind you. The fact that Mac Jones only threw 3 passes was neither here nor there, because they were able to run the ball down the throats of Buffalo and beat them in their own backyard, which should never have happened. The Bills should have absolutely dominated that game. They should be built for that sort of thing, and they weren't. What I think will be interesting about Buffalo is whether or not they can follow on from the second half that they had against Tampa Bay, or whether or not that was just an anomalous performance. And actually, the Buffalo that we've seen over the past 6 weeks is the real Buffalo Bills. So I think that'll be the interesting challenge for Sean McDermott over the next few weeks. I'm not sure about Buffalo. Everybody has bad luck. Everybody's injured. You go around the league and look at play. Well, that's the 49ers. You look at the Packers. They lost Billy Turner. They're down to like their 8th string offensive line. They're still, putting up 45 points. It's, you look at the Rams and, Jalen Ramsey's out of the game 5 hours before because of COVID, and they're playing arguably the most explosive offense in the NFL, and they still beat them on the road. So, I don't buy the bad luck thing. I just don't think Buffalo have been very good in critical stretches. And they were completely flat out coached by Bill Belichick and his coaches at home a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and as you can tell, we're trying to avoid talking about the New York Jets, because why would we want to talk about the New York Jets? So we're talking a little NFL football here. Yeah, I was on a Bills podcast, and listening to them, I couldn't help but smile. They swear they have the worst offensive line in football, and I'm trying to tell them, I'm a Dolphin fan. I can tell you don't. Okay,
yeah.
But they actually believe. I don't know your thoughts, because coming into the season, it seemed to me, and it seemed to most of us, like, okay, this is a slog. We're gonna have to chase down this team, this Bills team. I talked to these guys from the Rockpile Report, and they have their doubts on McDermott, and they know, according to them, they have no running game, and their offensive line is absolutely terrible because Josh Allen gets hit too much. What are your thoughts on this Bills team that was supposed to be our competition? We know for a fact they own us, which is odd because we seem to be very competitive with New England, having won 4 out of the last 5. But we know they own us. We know we have to overcome them, but they seem to be not only regressing, but at a crossroads, really, right?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to inability to run the ball. I don't think their offensive line is that bad at all. They just don't have a running back. They don't have a running game. They're overly reliant on Josh Allen. Josh Allen takes so many hits because he has to do what he does to manipulate the pocket and get outside and make plays with his feet because they can't establish the run. And when teams know that you can't establish the run, they make it more difficult for you in the secondary, which is part of the issue. And I think some of the Bills players, some of the Bills big defensive players, notably Tremaine Edmonds, have really struggled this year. That expected pass rush has kind of, not really, you look at the with Gregory Rousseau and the kid from Iowa, they've really struggled with Epinesa to threaten quarterbacks. Has put an awful lot of pressure on Matt Milano, who's having another great year. They lost Tre'Davious White, who's one of the best corners in the league. They've got arguably alongside the Green Bay pairing of Darnell Savage and Adrian Amos, the best safety combo in the league with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. But yeah, I just to hear Bills fans go, "Oh, we're not sure about McDermott." I mean, it's just like, come on, wake up! Like, he's one of the best coaches in the league. Brandon Beane just needs to fix that offensive line, not that the offensive line, that running game. And they'll be absolutely fine. They're just so one-dimensional. That's the problem. That's the reason why they get into the situations they've been getting into, because they can't. I mean, that game against Tampa Bay, I think they only ran the ball once in the first. Did they run the ball at all using a running back in the first half? I don't think they did.
They're running. They gave a carry to their running back for the first time with, I believe, 14 minutes left in the third quarter. That's not normal.
That tells you exactly what you need to know. So, yeah.
So, and moving on to the NFC. Well, no, let's stay in the AFC a little bit. I think it's getting clearer by the day. Would it surprise you to learn, Simon, that the number 1 defense in the NFL is not the Miami Dolphins since week 9? Dolphins are actually 3rd, which is not terrible. You know who's number 1, right?
Yeah, the Chiefs.
Yes, they're back, right? They're just waiting for Pat Mahomes to come up to speed, and they're making their 3rd trip to the Super Bowl. Aren't they the best team in the AFC?
I don't think their offense still isn't very good.
No.
I don't think they were very good against the Raiders. The Raiders were so abject that it was almost like a mulligan. Melvin Ingram has been such a huge pickup for them. He's played so well. You put Ingram and Chris Jones on the same side on early downs, and their run game stunts and blitzes are just absolutely, dominant. Ingram's contributions stopping the run have been absolutely huge, forcing teams into getting behind the chains.
Sean Jones moving back into defensive tackle. Also,
just had such a huge, and that's because of Ingram's allowed them to do that. It's just been massive. I still don't think the offense is, it's inconsistent in the run game. It needs another receiver who can take the pressure off Tyreek Hill. Travis Kelce, and what's then tending to happen is that Travis Kelce's getting doubled as well because for whatever. And Mahomes is partly to blame for that in a way. He's almost become he's almost turned into the Aaron Rodgers of 4 years ago when he's, was throwing off every platform and trying to do
unnecessarily at times too.
Yeah, he's just, the thing that worries me about the Chiefs is that they don't really have a basic offense in terms of a basic scheme. You look at I hate to keep talking about the Packers, but you go and look at how Nathaniel Hackett has them schemed. They are schemed beautifully. You take the opposite end of the scale, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and you look at their route combinations and their schematics. They're horrendous. But I think Eric Bieniemy's struggling a little bit, and Mahomes is so good, and he can make every throw from everywhere that there's a base level of their offense that they almost have to mess around a bit for it to work, or for them to feel like they need to mess around for it to work, when actually that's not the case at all. And I felt like they got back a little bit to that against the Raiders. But, like I said, that feels like a mulligan game because the Raiders were so bad.
Yeah, and moving on to the NFC, the Cardinals are supposed to be the class, but there's one problem. They're playing for home field advantage, and they're absolutely horrific at home. They're 7-0 on the road with an average margin of victory in double digits, Simon. So if the Cardinals come to town, they're kicking your ass. But if you're going to them, you have a very good chance of beating them since they're 3-3 at home. So, yeah, what do you make of that team? Because they're trying to play to get more of those games at home against teams that theoretically are going to be good, right? And they're not very good at home. Like, I don't understand that team, but that was not a competitive game against the Rams until very, very late. It was 2 scores the entire way through. Your thoughts on the NFC briefly before we move on to the Dolphins here?
Oh no, I thought I disagree. I thought it was a very competitive game. I thought that essentially the interception to start the second half turned it from a back and forth, you score, we score, you score, we score, into you score, we score, you score, we score, you score, you score game. But to me, it's coaching. Cliff Kingsbury is just not an NFL caliber coach. He is not the biggest decision in that game was you've got Matt Prater in that game, who's kicked more 50-plus yard field goals than anybody in the NFL history. You have 5.5 minutes to go. You have the ball inside Matt Prater territory, and you let to go for it on 4th down by 10 points, needing a field goal. You let to go for it on 4th down. Mistake 1. Mistake 2 is that you run the ball on 4th and 1 using your running back and not the most explosive running quarterback in the NFL in Kyler Murray. I.e., you don't go 5 wides and say, if your first option is not available, then just run it because you only need a yard. What you don't do is you hand the ball off to James Conner, who had a nice game as a receiver, but you don't hand it off to James Conner and run it straight up the middle into the strength of that defensive line, which is Aaron Donald and Greg Gaines, and expect to gain a yard. You kick the field goal there because what that did is it took all the air out of the stadium. Like the comeback, they had 2 more possessions after that. It was just astonishing. They didn't kick the field goal, and then all of a sudden, everybody's back into it. When they didn't go for it when they didn't get it on 4th down, everybody still knows that you need 2 possessions. The fans started leaving, therefore the atmosphere changes, and players are just like, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. If they kick the field goal there, they're down by 7 points. The Rams then went 3 and out. They could have had the ball, drove down the field, and scored a touchdown. I mean, I just don't think Cliff Kingsbury is a very good coach, and I think that's the reason that they ultimately, because I think they're arguably the most talented team in the league. I think there's a couple of other teams that are right up there. We look at their roster from, I don't think their run game is great, but Connor's excellent as a receiver. But you look at their, receiving options with Green and Hopkins and Kirk and Moore, Zach Ertz at tight end. The offensive line is decent. DJ Humphries has played well. Rodney Hudson's been brilliant. Defensive line and linebackers, Chandler Jones is great. Isaiah Simmons is great.
David Collins.
Marcus Golden is great. I mean, David Collins has barely played, to be honest. He's been benched, but Golden is a really good underrated player. And then the secondary is great. Byron Murphy's one of the most, underrated players in the league. Buda Baker, Jalen Thompson, Marco Wilson is playing well. They got a good kicking game. They got good special teams. They're badly coached. Their head man is a bad coach. I think, they have other good coaches, as part of the team. But in terms of the front man, I think, because I think James Saxon and Sean Jefferson and people like that are really good. Vance Joseph, Brenton Buckner's a great defensive line coach. But yeah, to me, they're being let down by Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah, and the NFC is completely top heavy because, as an example, the Dolphins at 6-7 would be in the playoffs already if if they were in the NFC. Uh,
It's a
Dallas,
powerful conference, though. I think you look at Dallas,
yeah.
you look at Green Bay. I mean, nobody wants to play Dallas in the playoffs. Dallas could easily get to the Super Bowl. Arizona, great
If the
team.
NFL games were 55 minutes, Dallas would win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Green Bay, a really good team. Nobody wants to face either Seattle if they get in or San Francisco in the playoffs because Garoppolo is limited, but they can run the ball, they can play defense. That front seven is really good. If Deebo Samuel and Kittle are healthy, nobody wants that, and nobody wants to face Russell Wilson in the playoff. Absolutely nobody wants to play Russell Wilson in the playoffs. Minnesota have got as much talent as anybody in the league. They're another badly coached team. I think the NFC's really, and obviously Tampa Bay look like they're hitting their stride. Looks like Tampa Bay and Kansas City are hitting their stride at kind of the right time. You're always looking for a team that starts late November, early December to start picking up wins, that's got talent. And I think those two are, two teams that could really make a push. But I think, there's going to be some classic playoff, Dallas going to Green Bay, Arizona going to Tampa Bay. That could be the final four in the NFC, and that's a couple of monster matchups.
Yeah, Tampa Bay, that offense, they do whatever they want to do when they want to do it, and they're capable in almost any situation, from behind, ahead, because they run the ball well, they throw the ball well, they throw it in all parts of the field well, they throw it deep well, they throw it intermediate well. And they don't run out of options. When you have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and now Rob Gronkowski, that guy retired. Like, why did he retire? He's one of the best tight ends in football again. Again.
I mean, he's the fascinating thing about Gronkowski is that what Bruce Arians is doing is essentially what Bill Belichick was doing, which is just let him rest up for most of the regular season, because you're getting to the playoffs, and then you can just bring him in. The running game works in part because it's so well blocked up front, but he's still such a good blocker. He's still such a good inline blocker, and he's uncoverable as a receiver. I thought Dane Jackson actually played him really well on Sunday, but he's so difficult to cover. He's so physical. He's such a big body, such a wide load. He's got such a great relationship in terms of understanding with Tom Brady that he's so difficult to play against. And there's not a player in the league that can match up against him. He can just box out defenders. You can't play linebackers against him because he's just too nuanced, and corners he just out physicals them, or DBs. They are Tampa Bay are scary good.
Yeah, him and George Kittle. That's the class at tight end. When people talk about Gesicki is not this, he's not that, they're essentially saying that Mike Gesicki is not George Kittle or Rob Gronkowski. That's what they're saying. Because Gesicki's of this class of every other tight end, which refuses to block, and it's kind of one-dimensional, but it's a good dimension. Now, getting there, Mike Gesicki has disappeared, Simon. I don't know. Are you aware where he is? Or because it's been a while since he's had a game for this team.
Yeah, I mean, the drop touchdown, the one that hit you in the helmet was, I think he's had an up and down year, actually, which is good in a way. I think it makes for a very interesting decision for the Dolphins in terms of whether or not they keep him or whether or not they let him walk. Because essentially what you're paying for is and also part of it is going to be the classification of whether or not, him and his agent are clearly going to push for him being paid as a wide receiver, because he plays so, I think I read yesterday something like 96% of his snaps either come out wide or in the slot. He plays very, 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 very infrequently in line. So do you pay that? I think it's 21 million. The fee if you franchise him is 21 million for a wide receiver. I think it's 11 million for a tight end. That's two hugely different.
I can promise you that they're going to fight pretty hard to tag him as a tight end.
Oh, of course, and every team in the league will want to pay him as a tight end. So I think he's going to. But whether or not the Dolphins feel like he's worth, because he does so little inline blocking, but he's also a critical part of the offense. But I think Mike Gesicki will work better when there are better options at wide receiver and there's a running game. Because it just makes defenses just need to key on Gesicki and on Waddle. Really, if Parker's back, then obviously that's different. But you can roll safeties over the top and it makes it much more difficult. And the Dolphins, I think the Dolphins have done well, actually. I think George Godsey's done a decent job over the past 5-6 weeks. The frustrating thing, and you look at some of the teams, who was I watching the other night that lined, it was the Bears who lined Darnell Mooney or Damiere Byrd up in the backfield when Byrd scored the long touchdown against the Packers. And it's like, we don't really do that with, the 49ers lining George Kittle up in the backfield just to get matchups. What the Bears did was move Byrd from the outside to the slot to the backfield in the same play. And then they got the matchup that they wanted against Henry Black, the linebacker, and they were able to score a touchdown. That's what creative offensive coordinators do. I think Godsey, like I said, has done a good job. But you'd like to see, Jalen Waddle, I think, is in motion more than any receiver in the league. But you'd like to see him line up in different, because the reason why they're in motion is twofold. One, it's to get a matchup. Two, or threefold actually. One, it's to get a matchup. Two, it's to get Waddle going in terms of, his get-up speed is already quick, but he's already moving. It gives him an even bigger advantage. But three, it gives Tua the opportunity when there's a motion man, when there's a movement, to see what the defense is. So I think getting Waddle up in the backfield and just getting him on linebackers would be great. Just getting him moving around a bit more and those sorts of things. But I think it's an interesting decision for the Dolphins. As to, I would pay Gesicki, but I wouldn't pay him as a wide receiver. He's a tight end, and that's what he should be paid as.
Yeah, I completely agree. One thing that we can say about this team, well, what we could say about Tua Tagovailoa is he's playing well, and he has been playing well for a few weeks, and he's been throwing to essentially nobody. He's been throwing to Waddle and Gesicki, and not to Gesicki too much the last few weeks. He just finished getting Parker back. Tua has been elevating these guys, and when I mean these guys, I'm talking about the Isaiah Fords of the world and the Matt Collinses of the world. He's elevated them. Is this, you almost hate to say this, but are they like learning maybe to invest their dollars, their skill player dollars, into maybe running back, or maybe using some of those dollars on tackles and not necessarily going after high priced talent at wide receiver, because their quarterback seems to elevate most of what they put out there for them?
I think he elevates them in the short and intermediate areas. I'm not sure anything more than that, because I'm not sure he's that kind of guy. I think what will be interesting is that if it was me, I would be spending my free agent money on the offensive line, and then I would look at, receiver talent in the draft and running back talent in the draft. It's a very good running back class. It's a much more underrated class than people are giving credit for. You can pick 10 or 12 guys that you think, you would not take a chance on, because you don't need to take a chance on these guys. But there are, 10 or 12 running backs where you think actually this guy could be a difference maker, whether that's, right at the top end with an Isaiah Spiller or Zach Charbonnet or Brian Robinson at Alabama, Breece Hall, bit of a separation then to people like Kenneth Walker and Devonta Price at Florida International, and then you've got the kind of the Mars Gaskin type back in Kyren Williams and James Cook, obviously Dalvin Cook's brother, Damian Pierce at Florida, Rashad White, Arizona State, Zamir White at Georgia, Jerome Ford at Cincinnati, a really good player. I mean, these are all starting backs at the next level. You look at the Oklahoma kids, Kennedy Brooks and Eric Gray. These are RPO running backs. So you could easily see the Dolphins double dip on backs. Tyler Algier of BYU. You could see them go a second rounder and a sixth rounder to do that sort of thing. And then, you're looking at wide receivers, whether you go early with receivers with a Olave or a Jameson Williams or a Garrett Wilson, or again, same situation. You go down the Treylon Burks, Jahan Dotson, David Bell, Mechie coming off the ACL. I suspect John Mechie will go back to school, but Jalen Tolbert at South Alabama, Alec Pierce at Cincinnati, George Pickens at Georgia, Aeneas Smith at Texas A&M, Jaquez Ezard at Sam Houston State. There's a lot of receiving talent in the draft. But I think they've got to sort out the offensive line, because when it comes to the draft, they're going to be in a position, or they won't be in a position to take one of the top two guys, Charles Cross at Mississippi State and Evan Neal of Alabama. And then after that, you're in a bit of a situation because I think probably the next two cabs off the rank, as it were, are probably, certainly left tackle, are probably going to be Trevor Penning at Northern Iowa, and then Bernard Ryman, the Austrian from Central Michigan. And I think they're projects, and I don't think the Dolphins need another project at left tackle. So I think, you know, we look at the names. Teron Armstead is the guy, and you look at some of the more veteran tackles in the league. Jason Peters at 39, Andrew Whitworth at 40, you know, Dwayne Brown, late 30s, still playing at a high level. You know, just Teron Armstead being the wrong side of 30, even in the early 30s, I don't think is an issue. Health is obviously a bit of an issue. And then you look at, you know, is an Eric Fisher a stopgap? Is a Dwayne Brown, who's played well, is he a stopgap? You know, it's a shame about George Fant, who's played brilliantly at left tackle. The Jets, obviously, still 2 years to go on his contract. So, but I think you've got to invest. You know, Ryan Jensen at center, you know, he's 31, but do the Buccaneers let him go? If they do, that's the sort of player that you want, because you kind of feel like that. It feels like 2 of the 5 spots are going to stay the same in terms of the personnel. So Eichenberg, they traded up for him in the second round. He's going to get a shot to start probably at right tackle. Rob Hunt feels like the best player on the offensive line. They're going to, you know, almost certainly right guard and right tackle feel like they're probably set in stone from next year. Center, obviously a big issue. Do they draft a center like Tyler Linderbaum? Does Linderbaum even get there, quite frankly? And even if he does, at 297 pounds, that's the sort of weight that the Dolphins will look and go, oh no, actually we'll stick with Michael Dieter. Even though Linderbaum to me is the best center to come out since Travis Frederick. So, you know, and I loved Creed Humphrey, and I have him above Creed Humphrey, and Humphrey's arguably the best center in the league at the moment.
Yes, he is.
Along with the kid in the Chargers who's at Green Bay.
And McCoy for New Orleans.
Yeah,
He could shake free. He could shake free. New Orleans has cap issues.
I can't see that happening. I think that
if it does, it's a thought, right?
Oh, of course. So left guard, obviously Austin Jackson. I don't think they're ready to give up on Austin Jackson, and I actually don't think they're ready to give up on Austin Jackson as a left tackle. I think he's so young. He's so inexperienced. He needs weight work, he needs footwork work, he needs technique work. But I don't think at 22 they're ready to give up on him yet, because he's a sort of player that, you know, you look at Billy Turner, you know, starting right tackle, starting right guard for the Packers has been really solid. Dolphins probably gave up a bit too early on Billy Turner. You don't want to make the same mistake with Austin Jackson, but you also don't want to be in a situation where you're keeping people hanging over and starting when they're not good enough. And that's the concern for me moving forwards, because they've got these players that they've invested high picks in who are underperforming. Do they feel, you know, are they just going to get rid of them, or are they going to keep them around and feel like they have to play them because they've invested high picks in them? And I kind of feel like it's the latter. That's what they're going to do, and therefore that lessens. So really, what you're looking at is center and left tackle. And maybe they'll get to the end of the year and go, "Oh, Michael Dieter's okay. We don't need another center." So then, really, all it becomes is left tackle, and all you're doing next year is it's Teron Armstead, Austin Jackson, Michael Dieter, Rob Hunt, and Liam Eichenberg. And that line hasn't really I mean, obviously it's improved because of Armstead, but you know, it also coaching. You know, coaching is such a massive issue. The Dolphins are not well coached on the offensive line.
No, they're not.
So that would be a huge concern. You know, how much better can an Eichenberg, a Dieter, Hunt, and a Jackson get with proper Bill Callahan, you know, that kind of level of quality coaching, you know, an Andy Heck or those sorts of guys, and that's the question I think that people need to answer.
Yeah, what they got to answer for is how they took, by almost every metric, an average to mediocre run game and made it the worst in the NFL. Like, you know, how do you do that? How is that possible? They had a run game last year that was capable of just popping up every once in a while and being effective. They ran for 250 yards against the Patriots. They ran for almost 160 against I believe it was against the Raiders. So, yeah, they got to answer for that. They got to figure out what they want to do with the running game. Obviously, they changed the entire run game around to a more zone scheme, but they have the wrong players to run that scheme. Speaking of running backs, they're all on the COVID list, Simon. Not that it matters because none of them have been any good this year, but they're all on the COVID list. They're all vaccinated. So they got to test clean twice, 24 hours apart, and they'll be ready to play. It's supposedly Javon Holland is also on the list, but he's assuring everybody he's playing because he's asymptomatic, and I believe he's already tested clean once. On the running back spot, like what are they doing? Like, what would you do? Right now, they have one guy on the roster, Duke Johnson.
Yeah, I'd bring Jared Dokes up from the practice squad. Duke Johnson, Dokes, and I suspect you'll get one of Gaskin or Ahmed back, probably both, quite frankly. But I'd be bringing, I would imagine Jared Dokes is getting a fair, level of carries this week. I mean, if he isn't, then something's really badly wrong coaching-wise. I mean, I know they brought 4 backs in to have a look at the other day, including Lamar Miller, Dexter Williams, but they didn't sign any of them. And I think Dokes would be the guy that I would turn to, quite frankly. In that situation, you'd probably want to add another back because you don't have the benefit of a Lynn Bowden if things go really bad. If a couple of guys get injured, you really want that kind of cushion of somebody who can kind of fill in if need. If Dokes gets hurt, you don't really want to be running the ball the entire game against with Duke Johnson as your running back. But that's what I'd do. And I kind of feel like, let's see what you kind of want to know what he is. They're keeping him around for a reason. Well, if he's any good, let's see what you're made of. Oh, actually, they signed Dexter Williams, I see. So, yeah. So this wouldn't surprise me if both Williams and Duke Johnson got called up. Jared Dokes got called up, I mean.
Yeah, if they bring up, I guess the drawback is that they're thinking if they bring up Jared Dokes, they expose him to the league. When they dump him back down, he's going to get poached. But you drafted him in the 7th round, like that usually happens.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're trying to save there. All right, they're playing the Jets. They're at home. The Jets are starting Zach Wilson, or Zach Cal Wilson, as you like to refer to him. He hasn't been good this year. They don't have Elijah Moore. They're an injured mess on offense, really. Their defense is kind of healthy. Quinnen Williams is not injured. He will play. So last week when he went down in a heap, evidently he finished the game, and he's going to play this week. So their defense is going to be relatively healthy. Dolphins take care of business this week?
Yeah, I think, always worries me coming off the bye when you've had that impetus of the last 5 weeks, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if this should be comfortable. If the Dolphins have got any ambition of making the playoffs, this needs to be a comfortable win to the point where, in an ideal world, you can rest some of the starters down the stretch. You're up against Zach Wilson. They've not played Wilson, which is the interesting thing. I think they'll confuse him. I think there'll be blitzes. You really want Holland back and healthy because he really makes that tick on the back end. But yeah, you look at the players that they're missing, in terms of, Corey Davis and Mekhi Becton and Michael Carter and, Bryce Huff and Lawson, obviously, that we know about, but Elijah Moore and Marcus May gone as well. I mean, that's a lot of talent on the sideline. And, I think we've got more than enough to keep them in check. And 35-10 Miami kind of thing. That's how I'm feeling it.
All right. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm more like 30-13, something like that. But yeah, they take care of business and they move on. And then the following week, big one in New Orleans on a Monday night, and we will talk about it. But till then.
Thanks for listening to 3 Yards Per Carry. You can subscribe via iTunes, on Podbean, or your usual podcast provider.